Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is November 1st. It is Thursday, November 1st, 2018. Happy November. Happy All Saints Day, according to what's on my calendar. All Souls Day tomorrow, I guess. So if you're not a saint and you do have a soul, wait until tomorrow. If you are a Republican, wait for All Wraiths Day, as I put it in this morning's startup post for Daily Coast Radio. We are ready to go with another show. That is to say, we're here. More things are happening. Greg Dworkin has rounded a number of them up. I have rounded a number of them up. We will compare notes and see exactly which one we are going to go with. Which list will we go with today? I'm thinking for the first hour we go with Greg's list, and then after that we'll try working out on mine. All right, let's see. Other things that nothing else happening in the morning lineup today. And Bill recognizes the theme of this morning's post. So yes, Daily Coast Radio is live now. It's All Saints Day, as we mentioned, and this morning, Kagro X Hi, that's me, canonizing the first 20 callers. So be sure to get the phone number handy, and when we give you the magic phrase that pays, really wandering into dangerous territory if I try and pick one of those phrases that pays, we'll get you all hooked up with a canonization, and it comes with fantastic parking benefits. So you'll be very pleased, I'm sure, by the outcome. We are, keeping an eye on a number of stories this morning, including, I think, probably the BS story. Oh, look at this. I have an echo in my headphones here. This is really interesting. I wonder where this one is coming from. But it's really far behind. This is really interesting. All right, well, we'll see whether we can figure this one out or whether it bothers Greg Dworkin at all. I think the volume is up loud enough to overcome this. But all right, yeah, so this morning's story, Donald Trump and his BS idea about deploying troops to the border. I'm not certain that is going to happen at all, and certainly not in the numbers that they're talking about. I'm seeing pictures circulated online of vehicles headed toward the border on train convoys, which makes me believe that somewhere, if someone does a reverse image search, they'll come up with this shot being, 3, 4, 5, 10, perhaps years old. So we will see whether that holds true. I don't think there's coming anything like the numbers. I don't think the tax cut's coming. I don't think the plan to save pre-existing conditions is coming. I think it's just nonsense. Something that he's saying in the heat of the election, hoping people will believe in it, and eventually hardly anyone will be deployed to the border, and certainly not in any capacity that will excite a Trump supporter. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, I guess. But his other plan, apparently, a fantastic plan to make sure that the migrants in the caravan do not enter our country and do not start using up our precious resources. He's planning to make sure they stay here forever by putting them in what now he's saying tent cities. He's going to arrest everybody who crosses the border and put them in tent cities, just like Joe Arpaio would have him do, because he's pardoned now. He's clean, you see. And they're going to put them in tent cities and keep them here forever, and they're not going to let them go anymore. No more releases is his big plan. And that, of course, means we're keeping them here, and I guess we're feeding them, unless we're starving them to death, in which case I guess the Nazi comparison finally pays off. So one way or another, he's either lying or a Nazi. I happen to think he's a lying Nazi. So not really doesn't put me in any difficult positions here. All right, well, let's see. I'm still not able to figure out what this echo is. I'm hearing myself about the echo is catching up with me. It was about 5 seconds or so behind, which was really distracting. Now it just feels like I'm in a big baseball stadium, which I can deal with at this point. Hopefully it's not ruining the experience for the rest of you who are listening live. And, well, let's see. This fantastic plan strikes me as particularly Trumpian. So I don't know how we're going to, no one asks, how we're going to pay for tent cities and putting people in them forever. And, of course, the other bit of news with the migrant caravan is that, as expected, as it has been the case with all the migrant caravans that they've ignored to this point, but this one is an invasion, yada, yada. It is dwindling in numbers, as can be expected. It's a very long walk. And if the goal is to get away from Honduras, well, mission accomplished, at least for the time being. And I guess it would not be surprising at all to find Spanish-speaking Central Americans deciding to settle closer to home and in a Spanish-speaking place where the culture might be a little bit easier to understand and assimilate into. So, it's not surprising that people might decide that, hey, the deal here might be a damn sight better than spending time in a tent city, if that's really going to happen in the United States. All right, Bill says thumbs up, no echo out here in Radio Land, so that's good news. It's just going to be me having to ignore this thing. I wonder if there's, anyway, I'll be exploring when Greg Dworkin comes on. The great benefit of having Greg Dworkin come on here, not only do you get news and analysis that sometimes you cannot get anywhere else on your radio or fake radio dial. I get to, it used to be that I would take that time to go and eat breakfast. Not really the case. I would like to claim that was true. But I can fiddle with the controls a little bit and see if I can figure out what's doing what here. It used to be this would happen. I can't figure it out. I probably will never figure it out. Let's leave it as a mystery, an enduring mystery of life, and instead turn control of the show over to Greg Dworkin, who's here now, and probably with no echo. And once he starts speaking, I won't have to, and then I won't hear myself, which is a great relief to me. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. So if you're hearing voices, I do have some friends I know who could take care of that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, technically speaking, that's what's happening.
Yeah, so, that's what worries me.
What kind of medication, for instance, might you
Well, I'm not a specialist. I just, deal with coughs and wheezing and things like that. But, I know people who know people, so
okay,
we'll fix you up. We'll find somebody in Virginia for you. But
can I specify which voices I don't want to hear?
I don't know if it works that way.
All right. Well, fingers crossed for medical science. I'm sure we'll get to that point
and
eventually.
Let's just hope it's covered.
All right.
And that's part of what's on the ballot.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of things on the ballot. And, the funny thing is Trump only has two plays. One is that they're coming to get you, whoever they are, and that he's going to protect your health care that he's trying to take away from you, and he's lying about that and wants you not to notice.
Okay.
I think LOL GOP pointed that out today on Twitter. There's really nothing else. And in addition to the caravan stories that you were telling, there's one other thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And, quite a bit of discussion about that this morning. And that is that Trump is racist as all get out. His closing argument, it turns out, is going to be economic anxiety. We know this because there's a CNN piece this morning with the wonderful headline, Trump shocks with racist new ad days before midterms.
That is or isn't a shock.
Well,
depending.
It's not a shock that he feels that way, but it's kind of a shock that the Republicans feel like they have to do this. Now, this is a web video. That means nobody's going to see it unless the reporters tell everybody about it, which means everybody's going to see it.
We are now. Okay.
Right. In the most racially charged national political ad in 30 years, President Donald Trump and the Republican Party accused Democrats of plotting to help people they depict as Central American invaders overrun the nation with cop killers.
Oh.
So you got everything, like all in one place.
Yeah.
It's like Willie Horton, at your corner taco stand.
Yes, with opioids.
The new web video, tweeted by the president 5 days before the midterm elections.
Yeah.
Imagine that, 5 days, and we can stop this nonsense. Is the most extreme step yet in the most inflammatory closing argument of any campaign in recent memory.
Okay.
We talked about this on the show yesterday, and Jonathan Bernstein had an article about it this morning, not because he was listening to the show, but because he was thinking along the same lines. There's actually no proof whatsoever that any of this stuff is working for Trump. But the conventional wisdom is, look what a smart play is. He's playing to his base. Now, whether he turns out Puerto Ricans in Florida with this, or whether he turns out, other people in Arizona with this, like the overwhelmingly a record-setting number of young people who are voting in Arizona and Texas. That remains to be seen. Yes.
Well, I think the safest play for him to do in terms of not turning out, say, Puerto Rican voters in Florida is it's a great play both financially and politically to do this as a web video where fewer people will see it, and it won't come on in the middle of your baseball game, although that's over with. A football game or soccer game or what have you on your television. You have to be out there on the email lists to get it.
So one of the interesting things, though, of course, is the headline as I read it to you. And then this headline from Mike Tomasky in Daily Beast: this Republican campaign is the most racist, dishonest ever. Yeah. It's just refreshing to see it called what it is.
Okay.
And part of what happened this week with Trump's response to the MAGA bomber and the caravan killer, that's with a K, is to double down on this stuff. And, of course, be angry that it was interfering with his plans to be racist, as a word I can't say, but Armando can on the air.
All get out.
Yes, exactly. That's what I meant.
Right.
Starts with F and ends with all get out.
Right. Why don't you effing all get out of here?
Right. See? Republicans used to be able to pretend that racism was tangential to their electoral success. With this campaign, these days are long gone. And this is one of the interesting quotes in here that Tomasky writes is actually Morning Joe.
Oh.
For decades, he writes, Republicans have been able to deny that these appeals were central to how they won elections. Sure, there's a little of that, but that's not why we win. We win because of the free enterprise system and low taxes, personal liberty.
Yeah, that's right.
The other morning, Tomasky writes, I got in the car and flipped on Morning Joe. You can do that if you get Sirius XM on your radio, radio there. And I heard the host in full lamentation. I've never believed what liberals said about us all along. I never believed there was this undercurrent in the Republican Party of racism, nativism, anti-Semitism.
Oh, no.
We spent our entire lives telling people it wasn't true. I'll be damned. I'm 55 years old. Bingo. They had us exactly right. They had the party exactly right. What are we to do now? Well, Tomasky writes, I wonder what Republican Party he was watching growing up in Pensacola, Florida.
Yes.
In the 1970s, when many young Southern Democratic governors who were civil rights progressives were race-baited by old Dixiecrats and new Republicans. But be that as it may, we can consider it a moral victory that he now sees what has been obvious to non-Scarborough America for half a century. The racism is now so plainly on display, so obviously a central organizing principle of the Republican Party, that people like Scarborough can no longer deny it, and that is a good development. So, again, I go back to that Felix Frankfurter quote that I'll mangle because I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's along the lines of, wisdom so seldom comes, one should not be ungrateful when it comes late.
Okay. I'll take it.
The fact is they can't hide the racism anymore. Give you another example of the overt racism. This is from a New York Times story. Justin Ling is tweeting it, freelance journalist, and it's about Brian Kemp. When residents in Quitman County, Georgia, elected a majority black school board for the first time in 2010, Mr. Kemp's office in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation sent armed investigators to interrogate residents about voter fraud and ultimately charged 12 organizers. One Quitman resident, Deborah Denard, was charged with 2 felonies for helping her partly blind father fill out his absentee ballot.
Wow.
Lula Smart was accused of assisting voters by carrying their sealed absentee ballots to the mailbox. She was charged with 32 felony counts, and if convicted, she faced over 100 years in prison. It's not hard to conclude that what Mr. Trump, Mr. Kemp, and their ilk are worried about is not voter fraud, but access to the ballot for minorities and Democrats. This attitude helps explain why Ms. Pearson was apparently the first person ever tried for improper assistance in casting a ballot, phrasing that doesn't even appear in Georgia's criminal statutes. Prosecutors eventually dropped the charge. Over the next 2 years, Ms. Pearson navigated 2 trials, 2 defense counsels, 3 drop charges, 1 hung jury. Finally, in late February, after a 20-minute jury deliberation, she was acquitted of all charges. 6 years later, she was finally free. What did she do? She gave verbal advice to somebody who asked her about how the voting machines worked.
Oh.
Not who to vote
right.
for. not
How do they
anything
work?
other than,
Pretty good.
you mark your ballot and then you put it in this slot. Something along those lines. And she was charged with a felony for that.
Well,
and so
you don't
the
wanna
story
help
is making the point that what Kemp and the people in Georgia have been doing all this time is trying to get minorities not to vote. And so in that context, the idea that he would kick people off the ballot wrongly
Yes.
and do stuff like that is just totally within context. And by the way, I just have to add that story in the New York Times, How to Punish Voters, the prosecution of individual voters for fraud is a trend that seems intended to intimidate, is by our own Josie Duffy Rice, who writes for Daily Kos on law and criminal justice issues. Here she is writing in the New York Times. So it's a great story, and I recommend it to everybody. But it gives you an idea of the overt racism that's happening right now in this campaign.
Yeah, and this is the guy who is Secretary of State, of course, and not only Secretary of State during his own election and therefore the judge of his own election, but yeah, this is the background in which he's working, and he and another committed racist and vote suppressor, Chris Kobach, however we say it, he's also got an earful on TV. Last night, too, I see that clip circulating as Jeff Toobin just tells him, I don't know who else was on and who was hosting even. All I know is he's like, yeah, you're a racist. Your real problem is that people sometimes vote for Democrats and you want to stop that. And so he got to wince and say, no, it's all about freedom or whatever, or something.
Yeah,
so
right.
Good,
it's all
good day
economic
for this.
anxiety, as we've been talking about.
Right.
Here's one from Ross Story, not my favorite source of news, but it's at least seems to accurately cover Mark Sanford's quote here.
Yes.
GOP Representative Mark Sanford, Haitian babies born in U.S. don't deserve birthrights because they aren't former slaves. I missed Armando's segment when he talked about this with you.
Oh, yeah, sure. We talked a little bit about that. We didn't talk about the Haitians in particular, but
No, with the whole meaning of the 14th Amendment.
Yes.
Basically, what Sanford said is that he doesn't like the idea of Trump doing this by executive order. He thinks it should be just something that he passes as a law.
Okay, let's just go do that.
Right? Section 1
also
states all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Yeah.
Thereof. I love lawyer words. Thereof. Are citizens of the U.S. and of the state wherein they reside. To wit. Other lawyerly things. Groucho Marx used to throw that in whenever he was pretending to be a lawyer. To Hunga-Dunga, and McCormick. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the U.S., nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
Yeah, don't do that.
Nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Sanford lost his seat, also said he couldn't condemn the alleged racism of Steve King because he's been focused on shutting down his office. So it's been way too busy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, why would you? You don't want to look up from that.
What do you make of the suggestion that birthright citizenship can be revoked with the stroke of a pen? MSNBC host Craig Melvin, who happens to be African American, asked the South Carolina Republican. I would find that hard to believe, Sanford replied. I'm not a fan of birthright citizenship. I think it's much more complex than the stroke of a pen. Why aren't you a fan of it?
Two different things.
You do recognize it's enshrined in the Constitution, in the 14th Amendment.
Right.
Well, I happen to be co-sponsoring a bill that would say otherwise.
You were
Stanford
closing your
stuttered.
office.
I think there's a number of folks who have said that particular interpretation is not really what the Founding Fathers intended. The idea you just happen to come in from Haiti or anywhere else.
Yes.
Not a Haitian vote in Florida, by the way. And because you get your vote to shore, all of a sudden you are open to the same rights and privileges that everybody else is. I think that's at odds with the intent. I think it was ultimately about slavery at the time and rights that should come to former slaves. We'll leave it to legal experts. So basically what he's saying is Haitians weren't slaves, therefore they don't get to count themselves as citizens, and their votes in Florida shouldn't count.
Haitians just appeared in Haiti.
Right. So, that's the closing argument. This economic anxiety argument is the closing argument that Trump is making.
Yeah.
And Max Boot, ex-Republican, responds in the appropriate way. Vote against all Republicans, every single one.
Okay.
If you're sick of it and sick and tired of this and sick and tired of all the other stuff they're doing, vote Democrat.
Yes. I guess so. I mean,
For every office, regardless of who they are. Even Bob Menendez in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And I say that as a former Republican. I threw in the Menendez.
Oh, okay. I say that as a former New Jerseyan.
Yeah.
You should go ahead and do it anyway. Yeah, well, I don't know what his distinction is. Again, I said this yesterday. I'm just going to have to reiterate. I'm not surprised, of course. This is gimmitarianism at work here behind all of this, but there can be no simpler, more natural seeming rule about citizenship than that you are entitled to citizenship where you are born. It's an ancient rule. Everyone has, it's in widespread use around the world currently, although they keep denying that that's the case. It is true. And it's the minimum basic it's the minimum basic default rule for citizenship, like going back to biblical times. And I can't believe that here we are with Republicans embracing legalistic nuance all of a sudden, except that, they're gimmitarians. So this gets me out of the spot. Fine. All of the stupid stuff, the egghead nuance crap that we hate about PC liberals, yada, yada, suddenly coming to our rescue. And now we love it.
Yeah. It's just like the debate about healthcare.
Yeah.
We wanted to take it away from you.
Right.
And you caught us, and now we're going to lie about it.
Yeah.
And we wanted to be racist and take your vote away from you, and you caught us, and now we're going to lie about it and say, no, it's based on nuance.
Yes. Right. It's all aimed
Besides,
at
you're not
else.
Haitian, so shut up.
Yeah. And by the way, Haitians were slaves. Okay. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess you're saying they weren't my slaves.
Bizarre, but what's so bizarre about it is just the outright naked racism of it that they're not even trying to hide.
Mm-hmm.
There are no two sides to the 14th Amendment. If you want to overturn that, it's a constitutional, process there. You don't want to take that, then I don't know what you're doing. And the funny part, of course, is Kellyanne Conway's husband was writing about that in the Washington Post the other day.
Right. Well, Kellyanne Conway was giving comments to the opposite effect.
Exactly.
Well, that's not a new play.
They've become the Mary Madeline, James Carville power couple in Washington. That's most fun to watch, right?
Okay. Yes. I guess so. That's probably what's going on here. Or if you go far enough back, the Earl and Countess of Richmond in the War of the Roses. You take one side, I'll take the other.
Yeah, something along those lines. Anyway, so the election's coming. We'll talk a little bit about election stuff and early vote and all the stuff we don't know after the break, which is coming up. But I think it's important to focus on what will happen after the election. We have the lame duck where God knows what the Republicans are going to do after they lose the House. And we also have Robert Mueller in the background there trying his best to not pull a James Comey and stay away from the election. But this piece appears in the Washington Post from Norm Eisen et al.
Okay.
The election is almost here. That means Mueller's next move is coming soon, and they talk all about how Roger Stone's going to be indicted.
Oh, good. Well, I hope that's next.
Yeah, and they think it is based on, Jerome Corsi having to speak to the grand jury and all of Stone's associates having to speak and already haven't spoke to the special counsel. And then the pressure comes on Roger Stone, who will never turn on Trump, just like Manafort will never turn on Trump. And, the trouble with these sleazebags is, they're not Gordon Liddy. They think they are. But as soon as you start, threatening them with 40 years in jail and putting you in with a bunch of Democrats.
Yes.
You can't do that. I'll talk. I'll sing like a canary.
Well, good. I'm waiting. Okay. Well, by the way, a what should we call it? A rumor that's taking on more and more momentum. Lots of people speculating on the idea that perhaps Mueller has an indictment or subpoena for Trump directly that he's holding until after the election. A lot of interesting speculation being written up there.
It's going to be served by the marshal of the Supreme Court, perhaps.
Well, I mean, bigger names than Louise Mensch are theorizing over it.
With just as much information, right? I mean, the point is that the people who know aren't talking. Well, that's the people who don't know are.
Although there are some clues to be gleaned from who's not talking about things that are happening that can only really mean one thing. It's just that there's no confirmation of any, or it may be that it's a slower developing play than you think. We'll see. But
I'll
maybe
go back
we'll
to
catch
Norm
up on
Eisen,
that.
who concludes his article by saying this. With voting less than a week away and already well in progress in many states, I think we've got 24.5 million people that have already voted. The outcome of the looming clash, meaning Mueller versus Trump, appears to reside exactly where it belongs in a democracy, with the American people. If you want those rumors to come true, if you want that story to continue, you better get yourself a Democratic House, because if and when Trump fires Mueller for getting too close to his finances, then the House has to hire Mueller as their special investigator so that they can continue this stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess so. We'll try and keep up with what's happening, and we'll discuss who's writing about which rumors, perhaps.
Yeah, we can do that. We'll talk about some early vote stuff from Target Smart and other people after the break, which is coming up in just a minute. There's a lot going on in terms of early voting. That's because there's a lot of people that are voting. And there's some good news on the youngins, on the millennial front, too.
Oh, really? Oh, what about even younger than that? How was Halloween for you last night, by the way?
Oh, it's become very quiet on my block. The way that Newtown has organized it to watch the kids is they all go to Main Street, and there's like an organized start at one end and go to the other for trick-or-treating. So they don't come in your neighborhood anymore. There's a place for them to go where they can be supervised.
I see.
Which actually works out better for everybody.
Yeah.
So nobody came.
Okay.
We're on a quiet cul-de-sac. And usually the only people that come are like the 2-, 3-, and 4-year-olds in the neighborhood who are too young to go do the big town thing.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's nice.
This year our crop was such that they were all old enough to go to town.
Okay. Well, I guess things are slowing down everywhere. I learned last night, by the way, that I guess the Almond Joy is like aging out of decent candy range, and it has become the Bit of Honey or Mary Jane of the current generation. I learned that last night.
Well, you better like peanut butter is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I know, and everybody's allergic to that. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just discussing our Halloween experiences. Did not know this. I don't know if we were ready to reveal it on the air for the first time, that you own a Darth Vader mask.
I do. I bought it at an auction to benefit the Department of Pediatrics at my hospital. And on the rare occasion I actually do get a trick-or-treater that comes to the door, I like to wear it.
Yeah. Answer the door, all that with the mask. That would be great. I would love to have that.
Go, and do heavy breathing noises.
Which is on PC with the kids these days.
Well, just don't do it on the phone. But,
okay.
You can do it in person.
Oh, all right. Heavy breathing.
They get the reference
when
when they're seeing you read the, wearing the Darth Vader mask.
Yes. Okay. I have just a regular mask, but I could use the whole head enclosure thing. Who wouldn't want that?
I'll send you a shot of that a little bit later. So after the break,
yes,
and the break is now over, we said we were going to talk a little bit about early vote, and we should. So right. Tom Bonia works for Target Smart. It's one of the voting firms,
not Target.
One of the polling firms. And he actually has a side project, a pro bono, everybody volunteered their time side project called Target Early.
Okay.
And what they're doing is tracking early voting all over the country.
Yes.
And what he wrote on October 30th, 2 days ago, we're seeing massive surges in early voting in key states among younger voters as well as black and Hispanic voters. The percent change in turnout versus 2014, same time period, and you got to do it 2014 versus 2018 because it's a midterm. You can't look at the 2018 numbers. You got to look at midterm to midterm.
2016, yeah.
So the percentage change in turnout for 18 to 29-year-olds is up 411%.
That's a lot of percents.
Right. 30 to 39-year-olds up 418%, 40 to 49 up 200, 50 to 64 up 127, 65 plus up 97. Gives you an idea that 65-year-olds are just inveterate voters, solid voters, so their numbers aren't going to change that much. But they're gone up a lot. And so one of the reasons we're seeing such big numbers, don't forget, is because Republicans are voting as well as Democrats. And that doesn't tell you who's going to win, because when you're looking at early vote, you don't know how they voted. And generally speaking, even big wins, like that is to say numbers of seats in the House, for example, are based on small margins. So, if you win 60% of the toss-ups by 1% each, that doesn't feel like you crushed them, and yet it's a wave. You took a whole lot of seats and won the House. So that's to keep in mind. African American vote is up 200%. Asian vote is up 48%. Caucasian up 155. Hispanic at the moment is down 57%. The Democrats are up 175%. Republicans are up 104%. Unaffiliated is up 188%. So the biggest growth in early voting is basically unaffiliated people. We see that, for example, in Nevada, where it's like 20%. Florida is also a similar number. And you don't know how those folks are voting, which is why it's impossible to look at early vote numbers and really know how it's going. You can only look at it and say, okay, compared to 2014, we're doing better, or compared to 2014, we're doing worse. Mm-hmm. And here's an example. Tom Bonia publishes, look at this comparison of the 14 and 18 early vote, that is to say 2014, 2018. Same number of days before Election Day for Texas by age. Okay.
Yeah.
So compared to 2014, 18 to 29-year-olds are up 5%. 30 to 39-year-olds are up 5%. 40 to 49-year-olds are up 4%. 50 to 64 and 65 are down. 65-year-olds are down 13% compared to the way they usually vote. When you add them all up, that's still more Republican votes than Democratic, which is,
yes,
again, not surprising because the early vote tends to be older anyway.
And they are Republican.
But
more Republicans there, yeah.
Almost 949,000 people have already cast a ballot in the general election who are voting for the first time. And among those voters, Democrats enjoy an 8% advantage in terms of modeled partisanship. And that's overall.
Yes.
So the early vote data is not predictive of final results. You can build an early vote by cannibalizing the election day vote. We'll see if that's happening in Nevada for the Republicans. But look at which side is turning out unlikely voters at a higher rate. If you know that, you don't always know that. But if you know that, that's a meaningful statistic, and that's why the Democrats enjoying an 8% advantage in unlikely voters is a big deal. Is that enough to make a wave? Yeah, depending upon where it falls and which race you're talking about.
Well, I think as we get more and more used to the idea of there being early voting and more younger voters growing up with not knowing a time when there wasn't, as people get more used to it, you're going to get better.
For now, the younger voters are expected to turn out late. They're not used to voting at all, let alone early voting.
Yeah.
Whereas the seniors are trained to do early voting.
And now that it's more available, people are getting into it. I didn't do it this time. I usually do, but that's usually because I'm away for Election Day. But this time I'm stuck here.
Right. Well, Connecticut doesn't allow it. You have to be out of town. They make it very difficult to do early voting or absentee voting.
Yeah, I mean, we started that way, and then Virginia just kind of said, all right, well, if you say you're going to be out of town.
Good enough, right?
Yeah.
So midterms 2018, this is Tom Embry-Dennis writing in The Independent, UK. Midterms 2018, early voting by young people up 500% in Texas and Georgia.
Okay.
Again, the larger bulk of people voting are older than that. But if the idea is, the young people never show up, they're showing up.
Well, at least 400% more of, I guess if 400% of zero isn't very good, but there was never zero, obviously.
Right. So Bonia writes in Medium that traditional battleground states have seen significant increases in early vote rates, especially among younger non-white voters. Arizona, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, voters 18 to 29 have all at least doubled their early vote compared to 2014, with young voters increasing their early vote rate by 364% in Nevada and 411% in Pennsylvania. We'll get to those two states in a minute, but just to throw in, Nevada had a really low turnout rate in 2014, so it's not surprising the numbers are up. But they're up a lot. I mean, they're not quite presidential. They're probably three-quarter presidential turnout at this point, and that's actually good. If you're looking at the Nevada early vote for signs of where we're going, the firewall is building in Clark County and Las Vegas. Whether it will be enough is unclear. It's going to be a close race. And you don't know how those 20% other non-affiliated voters are voting, so you can't really tell. In Pennsylvania, however, there's some new polling out, which is kind of astounding. The Governor Wolf, the Democrat, is up by like 24%. And so if you're up by 24 points,
yes,
that has significant meaning for the down ballot races. And Pennsylvania is one of those places where we're looking to pick up seats in the House.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's kind of a big deal that Pennsylvania looks the way it does. Alex Clearfield is writing from National Journal and Hotline. A thread on Pennsylvania, a hobby of mine. Lots of crazy stuff happened in 2006 in Pennsylvania. Democrats won in Pittsburgh suburbs, Bucks County, even northeast Pennsylvania, currently Marino's district. Two main reasons for this, besides Don Sherwood, a blue wave, and Rick Santorum and Lynn Swan got wiped out at the top of the ticket, completely wiped out. Santorum lost by 17, Swan by 20. If we see similar margins at the top of the ticket on Tuesday, and again, Wolf is ahead by 24, we could be in for a very interesting night. Take those very positive for Democrat Susquehanna polls for what you will, but they're even in this range. Obviously, the playing field is different. But weak top of ticket plus high Democratic enthusiasm would spice things up immensely. And then Franklin and Marshall this morning just came out with Wolf up 26, which is bonkers. If GOP top of ticket is facing extinction on Tuesday, down ballot could get even more interesting than projected. So that's all good news for Democrats. And if you're looking for where's the wave, that's where it is.
Yeah. Well, I was worried that we were going to hear, people are reading about this 24-point lead and saying, I don't need to vote. But hopefully not happening that way. If you're not hearing the message, you need to vote.
Looking at Texas, Bonier's looking at his own data.
Okay.
Well over 200,000 people who have never voted in any election before have already cast a ballot in Texas. The state with the second highest number of first-time voters, California, has only 78,000. Keep that in mind as you assess the polls in Texas, which show Beto closing. Probably losing based on the numbers. But, it'll be interesting.
Yes.
In Arizona, the Arizona data guru, that's how he calls himself on Twitter, Garrett Archer. Breakdown of new early voters by age and party for Arizona, 18 to 34-year-olds, is 36,000 new votes, new early voters, Republican 27%, Democrat 40%, non-affiliated 31%. And that's the highest number of any of the age groups.
Oh, all right.
Right? So the new early voters are skewing younger. And every day, Arizona started out being old. The 65-year-olds came out, the 85-year-olds came out, and it was very Republican-leaning. It still is. It's still a state that Sinema can win, though, the Democrat. And as each day goes past, the number of early voters by age and registration gets younger and more diverse. And so that's what's happening as voting goes on. Again, one of the reasons why you don't want to make too many conclusions. Early ballot update for October 31st, for example, from Arizona, 1.23 million votes already in. Parties, GOP 42, Democrats 34, other 23. That's plus 9 R. Estimate for women has increased to 51%. Median age drops to 63%. Average age has dropped to 60. So as voting goes on, the voting cohort is getting younger.
All right. Yeah. Well, as predicted, at least for the Desert West, for whatever reason, later in the week, you said, skews younger, and it's Thursday, so it's time to win.
Right. That's why on Monday, when we have the Monday show, we'll be able to properly analyze Nevada and Florida and get a much better idea of what's going on.
Yes.
Now, new poll out from the battleground states in the Washington Post. Democrats in prime position to take the House, but battleground district poll shows wild cards remain. The Democrats have a 4-point lead in these battleground states. Remember, they're battlegrounds. They're supposed to be tied. That's why they're battlegrounds. The 4-point age represents a superficial advantage, given the poll's 3.5-point margin of error, but the finding marks a sharp turn from 2016 when voters in these districts backed Republicans by a margin of 15 points. And 63 of the battleground districts are held by Republicans, so that kind of shift in sentiment would be sufficient for the Democrats to take control of the House. They only need 23 seats. So again, if you're looking for the wave, where is it? Well, it just wiped out a 15-point Republican advantage. That's where it is.
Okay. Got to take that.
Right? So I just, when you hear of these, I don't see the wave. Where's the wave? You're not going to see it until after the election. That's how it works, because waves mean you win all those close ones, and you don't know that until after the election.
Well,
so after the election, everybody's going to say, okay, I saw exactly what happened.
Yeah. That'll be clear then. People have weird misconceptions about waves. All the people who think tsunamis are 800-foot waves.
Right, exactly. Evan Seacrete, a Republican friend of mine who follows the young vote, the millennial votes very much, writes, this year, young voters have repeatedly told pollsters they're going to vote. They registered to vote at a higher rate than 2010 or 2014. They voted early in record numbers for a midterm, 500% more than 2014 in some states, and some still doubt they'll vote. Well, yeah, a lot of people are show me on that. But the fact of the matter is that they actually have been voting, and they're going to vote.
Okay. Well,
and they're mostly voting Democrat, so, that's all good news.
Just had to wait for later in the week. Wednesday is the day they switch over from handing out free Metamucil to avocado toast, and I think that is what accounts for a lot of the demographic change.
Yeah, maybe. So that's really where things stand. We're looking at polling in real time for the New York Times. Some interesting results so far. A lot of it is early, but California 45, the Democrat Porter 48, Mimi Walters, the incumbent 46. It's exactly the kind of district you'd expect to pick up. Of course, it's California, so by the time they're finished counting the votes, it'll be 2019. But still, give you an idea of what's going on. Iowa. 46% Finkenauer, the Democrat, 39% Blum, the incumbent. Virginia 7, Dave Bratt 49, Spanberger 43 with 6% undecided. That's a margin of error plus or minus 7 in that poll. Wow. So it's close enough so that you don't really know what's going on. But in early voting, Georgia 6, the Ossoff race without Ossoff, the Democrat is winning McBath. In Texas 32. Allred, the Democrat, is winning. Harley Ruda is beating Dana Rohrabacher, or at least it's close. 48-43 right now with not enough. It's an early poll, not enough to really say. Michigan 8, Slotkin's beating Mike Bishop. Illinois 14, Underwood is beating Holmgren. These are the Democrats beating the Republicans. And in the famous Iowa 4 with Steve King, and not enough to really know yet. Only 37 people have answered the phone. That may be the entire district.
37 people have answered the phone?
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't take the poll seriously until we reach 250 people. We're at 37.
Huh. Yeah. All right. I've never heard anybody admit that.
Well, this is live polling, so they're telling you as you go along. Right. However, it's 51 King and 44 Scholten. So it's a 7-point lead with hardly anybody answering. We'll see what happens when they actually get more calls.
Hello.
All right.
Yes.
Leonard Lance, one of the I'm a moderate Republican. I voted against the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Trust me, I will be independent, is losing.
No! Yeah, that's right.
He's losing. 39 Lance, 47% Malinowski in New Jersey.
Right. And only Al has answered the phone so far.
Right. The funny thing is that the New Jersey congressional races may wind up pulling Menendez over the finish line.
Well, okay.
Just like Gillen pulls Nelson.
Yeah.
In Florida.
And that might be it. People are going to show up to vote for the congressional elections. They have a hot contest in their House seat, and they're like, I didn't want to do this, but as long as I'm here.
Right. New York 11, Staten Island, and Southern Brooklyn. The smaller Southern Brooklyn area votes Democrat, but the much larger Staten Island contingent votes Republican. The previous Republican here, I think, is the one that threatened to throw a reporter off a balcony.
Oh.
and then got convicted or something
Yes.
or other. Can't
Right.
quite remember that story.
Mikey Seats.
Anyway, Dan Donovan, the current Republican, is 44, and Rose, the Democrat, is 40 with 15% undecided. That's a Staten Island district that's solidly Republican that is actually close enough to make a race out of it.
All right. Good. Like wavy.
Right? Tom MacArthur, another architect of the Republican health care law.
Oh, yeah.
New Jersey 3, he's at 45, and his opponent Andy Kim is at 44 with 9% undecided.
Okay.
I mean, these are all these close races where if they break one way, it's a wave, even though each one is a 1 or 2 point race, is the point I'm trying to make here.
Yes. Well, that's true. And okay, we anxiously await our results.
All
Answer the
right,
phones.
so we got this Nazi, Steve King.
Yes.
And we got Steve Stivers saying that, oh, well, we want nothing to do with you. And King saying, yeah, well, after I'm reelected, I'll get back to you. And so who calls him in his moment of crisis to support him and say, I'm with you all the way? Ted Cruz.
The Zodiac Killer. Yes.
The guy who everybody loves.
Right. I did see somebody tweeting yesterday in the new mold of things, the old the one we heard a week or two ago from Andrew Gillum. I'm not saying you're racist. I just say the racists say you're racist. What was it? The comment was, I'm not saying you're a Nazi sympathizer, Ted Cruz, but you did just call a Nazi to express sympathy. So, okay. I guess that does the trick.
So, piece in the Daily Beast, Trump has remade the world in Steve King's image. King is setting foot in the White House, let alone getting a 75-minute window with the president, is almost unfathomable to those who have followed his career, but that's what's happening. So, King has tacit support from the White House. He has overt support from Ted Cruz. Tells you what you need to know. And I go back to my original beginning of this whole segment to wrap it up and tell you that the final argument for Republicans is economic anxiety.
Right. AKA racism. So
AKA racism. That's exactly right.
Well, how
so that's where we stand, just in case you were wondering.
Yes. No. Yes.
Yes, no, yes.
Right.
Okay. Well, good. Thanks.
I wasn't wondering because you told me, yesterday. But,
I'm going to tell you again on Monday.
I'm glad to hear the news, and updates on it are well appreciated. So, okay. This is good news, and that is a good point. I hadn't heard that Steve King was spending 75, did you say 75 minutes with the president? How'd they settle on that number?
I don't know.
But
You'd have to actually read this story to know that.
An hour and 15 minutes, I guess. But okay, I don't know what he's got to say to him, because Steve King, as racist as he is, he's never done a damn thing in Congress but blab. And I guess it's a perfect match then for the president. They're not strategizing, they're just trading racism stories, I suppose. Okay, well, luckily neither one of them is adept at getting anything done, so hopefully that reflects itself at the polls.
Right. Oh, here's an update. After Jacob Wohl and Jack Berkman claimed over and over that their Mueller accuser would be there, they now say the woman won't be at the event because she's fearful for her life.
Oh. What happened to Surefire Intelligence security team?
It's a surefire winner.
Yeah. Right, I guess. Okay, well, she didn't... bad traffic, everybody. Sorry.
Well, guess what? The hoax turns out to be a hoax and blow up in their face, and that really hasn't changed.
No. You know what? It occurs to me, early voting has done great damage to the ability to choreograph October surprises.
Well, there's a number of things. We've had a number of October surprises. From the MAGA bomber to the caravan killer to Hurricane Michael in Florida. There's just been over and over and over a bunch of October surprises. And yet the contours of this election were set 6-7 months ago, so I'm not sure any of that really matters.
Well, I guess not in that sense. But I am wondering whether it seems like, although maybe I just can't tell the difference between a regular day in the Trump era and an October surprise.
They're all the same.
Yeah.
It's a day that ends in Y, and so there's going to be some kind of surprise.
Oh, any other administration or period of time, any one of these things would have been, well, that's the most obvious October surprise gambit I've ever seen. But here, I can't tell it. It's like background noise. So.
Well, there's
maybe that's
it's just an amazing contrast, as many people have said besides myself, between Trump at the end of 2016, after the Comey October surprise, Trump got off the air, got off Twitter, was quiet, shut his mouth for a couple of weeks, and it helped him. Every time he comes out and reminds us what we hate about Trump, all you're doing is motivating Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
You think you're helping yourself, you're not. Well, we'll have more of that discussion Wednesday.
Okay. I'm prepared to wait. Now it's the quiet period, and we'll do some electing.
Righty. Take care.
Thank you.
And I'll talk to you on Monday when we'll look at early votes that are finally in from the big states that we can actually interpret, which is to say Florida and especially Nevada. The other states, when the vote comes in, you really don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, the latest possible early voting on Monday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The latest on the early voting.
That's how it'll be.
Right. And then Wednesday, we'll have the earliest we can on the late voting.
Right. Get there late, but do it
California
early.
will do 2019. Take care, and I'll talk to you then.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, on Monday on Monday in the show, we'll have to be reminding everybody, vote late, vote often. I guess, because voting early, well, that takes the punch out of vote early and vote often. But okay, I'm glad we can now at least vote early legally. Now, voting often, I guess, will be next. I don't know. Anyway, let's see. All right, so what the hell are we going to do with the rest of this day? I mean, should we continue on talking? I think really the topic of the day is how kids hate coconut now, which is really amazing to me. I tweeted last night. I had two separate kids. My own kids said the same thing, but I asked some other kids. I didn't do a comprehensive survey. Less than 37 people answered the phone in my survey. I talked to two kids before I got the point, but I was not surprised to find out that two kids didn't like Almond Joy, and of course that would really not tell you very much. 2 is not a good number for a comprehensive survey, scientifically speaking. But what surprised me was that the two kids said the exact same thing, which made me go. I actually went online to check and see, is this a meme that I don't know about yet, bubbling up, and the kids know it and I don't? They both said, do you like Almond Joy? No, I don't like Almond Joy. And I wasn't giving any out. I just had heard from my own kids, like, Almond Joy. Kids hate Almond Joy, Dad. Well, good. I don't have any. I mean, I like them, but I'm going to ask some kids. So, let me ask you something. Do you like Almond Joy candy bars? No, I don't. Why not? What is it about Almond Joy that you don't like? And both kids separately in a few minutes apart, I just asked, kids in the first couple of groups that came to the door. And they said, coconut is garbage. But they both said garbage. Not one, it wasn't one saying, well, I hate coconut, and the other one said coconut is garbage. Or coconut's trash. Or coconut's garbage. Both said coconut is garbage. I searched. There's no coconut is garbage meme that I'm aware of. But a much more plausible explanation is that's just kids' lingo now. I mean, it's not like it's hard to understand what something is garbage means, but that's the phrasing that they very frequently use. So I'm going to have to fight back with a PR. If I wanted to fight back with a PR campaign for Almond Joy or anything else, I understand the terminology that we're supposed to use when they say coconut is garbage. We say, no, coconut is lit. That's what the kids say today. And I don't know if that's really going to work. I don't think that's going to convince anybody. But it's fine by me. I like the coconut ones. Though I do definitely prefer Almond Joy for a reason that, well, I guess other people who like coconut were saying, well, I like coconut, but Mounds is the way to go because Almond Joy is, well, one, half the people said they've got this almond flavored rock in the middle, and 2, it's milk chocolate, and that's garbage. I like the dark chocolate, even though, I mean, Mounds' dark chocolate is nothing to write home about either, but I don't like dark chocolate nearly as much. Anyway, so that's what we got. The kids like the biggest item, or the biggest requested item out of the bowl of mixed candies that we got today was for Sour Patch Kids, and a lot of kids like Smarties still, which is an old school thing, so I was happy to see them enjoy the Smarties. But, and peanut butter candy is huge, and kids, we didn't have any of that, but kids were clamoring for Reese's peanut butter cups and Reese's Pieces, and there's even Reese's peanut butter cups with Reese's Pieces in them, out there somewhere. But I just was trained to stop buying peanut butter candy. Oh, you can't buy peanut butter candy. There's kids out there will drop dead if they're within a city block of a pack of Reese's peanut butter cups. And it's true. I mean, it does sound a little scary, and sometimes people overdo it in terms of the way they describe things. But some kids are virulently allergic, violently, I guess I should say, allergic to peanuts. And really, it really is a matter of, I smell peanut butter, I'm sick, I'm in trouble, I need an injection, whatever it is. But we're trained. Finally, I caught up on this thing. No peanut butter candy. There are kids who can't have it, and they'll get home and their parents will weed out all the peanut butter candy and not let them eat it. And it's not like it took me a great deal of thought to catch on to this. My oldest son, who hasn't been trick-or-treating for a while, but he was mildly allergic to peanuts and peanut butter. And it was a matter of hating just hated peanut butter candy. So we would weed it out so he didn't accidentally eat any. But now kids love peanut butter candy somehow, and I don't know what to do. I also missed out on this trend, the teal candy bucket, or non-candy bucket. I guess they're for kids who have multiple food allergies. You don't want them to miss out on the fun of getting treats while trick-or-treating, and you're supposed to have a bucket of non-candy items that they can take something fun to play with or whatever, so that they can enjoy getting a treat even if they can't eat candy or be around candy for that matter. But on top of that, you were supposed to put it in a teal bucket, which I don't have a teal bucket. Where do you get one of these things? I don't know where you can go to buy these trending items, but I guess teal was the color would that be the ribbon that people wear for food allergies? And so now you have to have a teal bucket. I heard somebody talking about that, like, that's nice that you have a teal bucket. I'm very proud of you for having a large color range in your bucket selection. Plastic buckets are important. But anyway, I missed that one. Did you hear about that one? That's not news. We'll get back to the news after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think I finally got rid of that echo. I messed with a couple of buttons. I don't know. Let me think. Hello. Yeah, see, I don't know. We think so. Let's see. D. Gordon Liddy, Ideologue. That's always fun. We bought a teal pumpkin at Michael's to indicate we had non-food stuff. So I literally missed the memo on that. And we were at our younger son's Halloween concert, if you count it as a holiday, the orchestra band concerts, and they had some candy there, and the kids afterwards could come up and get candy, and they said there's candy in these buckets, and then the teal pumpkin doesn't have candy, and it has treats and or toys and various things for kids who have the food allergies. But she didn't say, we got the teal pumpkin. As you know, the teal pumpkin represents yada, yada, yada. They just said it like everybody knows what the teal pumpkin means. I just was like, okay, well, the orange pumpkin has candy and the other thing has candy and the teal pumpkin doesn't. It didn't register with me. So, okay, I'm a little late in catching up with that. Now I feel bad that we weren't ready for any kids. Nobody came and asked for our teal pumpkin or anything, although then I would have thought the kid was a spy and probably had him arrested. Where's your teal pumpkin? Zeus has fleas. What? Okay. See something, say something. I don't want to find out the kid is passing national security secrets door to door. That could be very dangerous in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. So you look out for these things. Another update, today being November 1st, I see Greg retweeting Aaron Rupar's reminder that Trump promised a very major tax cut by November. Remember that he said that he did, in fact, fail to deliver. This notes it for the record. By now, all of that will have lost its punch because the reporters all decided to interpret that for him and report to us instead that he said a major tax cut was coming, maybe after the election, etc. But he was very clear. It was going to happen before November, and it didn't. So there you have it, the end. There's no getting out of this one. Okay, What other stories might we want to bring up? Ah, yes. Well, I mentioned to you that there were people out there speculating about something major happening in the Mueller investigation, but perhaps it being held back until after the election or sealed for some future date. Let's see where to start with this one. I know I have at least one article speculating about it. I thought there was a second one out there, I guess a first one, because I thought the second one I had here is David K. Johnston's look at this issue, but I can't find the other one that I thought I had. So we'll just start with this one. He tweeted the other day, and linked to, a Politico story. That must be it. I must have had the Politico story set aside. But David K. Johnston speculates thus: former federal prosecutor uses telling details. He's not speculating. He's telling us that a former federal prosecutor is speculating in Politico. Now I'm getting it. Using telling details to amass solid case that weeks ago Mueller subpoenaed Donald Trump, and Trump is going to extremes in secret court filings to avoid testifying. We'll begin then by taking a look at the Politico piece here. It's Nelson W. Cunningham, which is totally a real name, asking, has Mueller subpoenaed the president? A careful reading of court filings suggests the special counsel hasn't been quiet. Far from it. In case you are wondering, these italicized letters tell us that Nelson W. Cunningham has served as a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York under Rudy Giuliani, which is not a great reference, general counsel of the Senate Judiciary Committee under then-chair Joe Biden, somewhat better, and general counsel of the White House Office of Administration under Bill Clinton. Stronger, perhaps, even still. He writes as follows: these months before the midterm elections are tough ones for all of us Mueller watchers. Has been kind of quiet, hasn't it? Outwardly, anyway. As we expected, he has gone quiet in deference to longstanding Justice Department policy that prosecutors should not take actions that might affect pending elections. So for all the people who said he's a by-the-book guy, you seem to have gotten that one exactly correct. Whatever he is doing, we continue, he is doing it quietly and even further from the public eye than usual. But thanks to some careful reporting by Politico, and this is in Politico, so I guess, I don't know whether he's blowing smoke or whether he's serious, but okay. Thanks to some careful reporting by Politico, which I have analyzed from my perspective as a former prosecutor, we might have stumbled upon how Robert Mueller is spending his midterms, secretly litigating against President Donald Trump for the right to throw him in the grand jury. As a former prosecutor and Senate and White House aide, I predicted here, and that would be a linked article, last May, that Mueller would promptly subpoena Trump and, like independent counsel Kenneth Starr back in 1998, bring a sitting president before his grand jury to round out and conclude his investigation. That would have been a bad prediction, of course. It hasn't happened. What Trump knew and when he knew it, and what exactly motivated his statements and actions are central to Mueller's inquiry on both Russian interference and obstruction of justice. As the summer proceeded, we certainly heard a great deal from Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, he also mostly quiet these days, about purported negotiations with Mueller's office regarding the propriety and scope of Trump's potential testimony. On August 15th, Giuliani said Trump would move to quash a subpoena and went so far as to say, quote, "We're pretty much finished with our memorandum opposing a subpoena," unquote. Then, nothing. Labor Day came and went without a visible move by Mueller to subpoena the president, and we entered the quiet period before the midterms. Even the voluble Giuliani went quiet, more or less, mindful of the time it would take to fight out the legal issues surrounding a presidential subpoena, and mindful of the ticking clock on Mueller's now 18-month-old investigation. Many of us began to wonder whether Mueller had decided to forego the compelling and possibly conclusive nature of presidential testimony in favor of findings built on inference and circumstantial evidence. A move that would leave a huge hole in his final report and findings. But now, Thanks to Politico's reporting, backed up by the simple gumshoe move of sitting in the clerk's office waiting to see who walks in and requests what file, we might know what Mueller has been up to. Since mid-August, he may have been locked in proceedings with Trump and his lawyers over a grand jury subpoena in secret litigation that could tell us by December whether the president will testify before Mueller's grand jury. The evidence lies in obscure docket entries at the clerk's office for the D.C. Circuit. Thanks to Politico's Josh Gerstein and Darren Samuelson, we know that on August 16th, the day after Giuliani said he was almost finished with his memorandum, remember, a sealed grand jury case was initiated in the D.C. Federal Circuit Court before Chief Judge Beryl A. Howell. We know that on September 19th, Howell issued a ruling, and 5 days later, one of the parties appealed to the D.C. Circuit. And, thanks to Politico's reporting, we know that the special counsel's office is involved because the reporter overheard a conversation in the clerk's office. We can further deduce that the special counsel prevailed in the district court and that the presumptive grand jury witness has frantically appealed that order and sought special treatment from the judges of the D.C. Circuit, often referred to as the second most important court in the land. Nothing about the docket sheets, however, discloses the identity of the witness. Politico asked many of the known attorneys for Mueller witnesses, including Jay Sekulow, another Trump lawyer, and each one denied knowledge of the identity of the witness. What, of course, would we expect the lawyer to say when asked about a proceeding the court has ordered sealed? But for those of us who have been appellate lawyers, you, me, no? All right, well, this guy says he has. The brief docket entries tell a story. Here's what we can glean. Bullet points here follow. The parties and the judges have moved with unusual alacrity. Parties normally have 30 days to appeal a lower court action. The witness here appealed just 5 days after losing in a district court, and 3 days later filed a motion before the appellate court to stay the district court's order. That's fast. Point 2 here. The appeals court itself responded with remarkable speed. 1 day after getting the witness's motion, the court gave the special counsel just 3 days to respond, blindingly short as appellate proceedings go. The special counsel's papers were filed October 1. Next up, at this point, an unspecified procedural flaw seems to have emerged, and on October 3rd, the appeals court dismissed the appeal. Just 2 days later, the lower court judge cured the flaw, the witness reappealed, and by October 10th, the witness was once again before the appellate court. Thanks to very quick action of all the judges, less than 1 week was lost due to a flaw that in other cases could have taken weeks or even months to resolve. And another bullet point here. Back before the D.C. Circuit, this case's very special handling continued. On October 10th, the day the case returned to the court, the parties filed a motion for expedited handling, and within 2 days the judges had granted their motion and set an accelerated briefing schedule. The witness was given just 11 days to file briefs, the special counsel, presumably, just 2 weeks to respond, and reply papers 1 week later. On November 14th, for those paying attention, that's 8 days after the midterm elections. Oral arguments are set for December 14th, a month later. Okay. That's the end of the bullet points. At every level, this matter has commanded the immediate and close attention of the judges involved, suggesting that no ordinary witness and no ordinary issue is involved. But is it the president? The docket sheets give one final but compelling clue. When the witness lost the first time in the circuit court, before the quick round trip to the district court, he petitioned, unusually, for rehearing en banc, meaning the witness thought the case was so important that it merited the very unusual action of convening all 10 of the D.C. Circuit judges to review the order. That is itself telling. This witness believes the case demands very special handling, but the order disposing of the petition is even more telling. Trump's sole appointee to that court, Gregory Katsas, recused himself. Why did he recuse himself? We don't know. By custom, judges typically don't disclose their reasons for sitting out a matter, but Katsas previously served in the Trump White House as one of 4 deputy White House counsels. He testified in his confirmation hearings that in that position, he handled executive branch legal issues, but made clear that apart from some discrete legal issues, he had not been involved in the special counsel's investigation. If the witness here were unrelated to the White House, unless the matter raised one of the discrete legal issues on which Katsas had previously given advice, there would be no reason for the judge to recuse himself. But if the witness were the president himself, if the matter involved an appeal from a secret order requiring the president to testify before the grand jury, then Katsas would certainly feel obligated to recuse himself from any official role. Not only was the president his former client, he was deputy counsel to the president, remember, but he owes his judicial position to the president's nomination. History provides a useful parallel. In 1974, in the unanimous Supreme Court decision United States v. Nixon, which required another witness president to comply with the subpoena, Justice William Rehnquist recused himself for essentially the same reasons. We cannot know from the brief docket entries that are available to us in this sealed case that the matter involves Trump. But we do know from Politico's reporting that it involves the special counsel and that the action here was filed the day after Giuliani noted publicly, "We're pretty much finished with our memorandum opposing the subpoena." We know that the district court had ruled in favor of the special counsel and against the witness, and that the losing witness moved with alacrity and with authority, and that the judges have responded with accelerated rulings and briefing schedules. We know that Judge Katsas, Trump's former counsel and nominee, has recused himself, and we know that this sealed legal matter will come to a head in the weeks just before the midterm elections. If Mueller were going to subpoena the president, and there's every reason why a careful and thorough prosecutor would want the central figure on the record on critical questions regarding his knowledge and intent, this is just the way we would expect him to do so. Quietly, expeditiously, and refusing to waste the lull in public attention demanded by the midterm elections. It all fits. And then the italicized letters come back in and tell us exactly what the ones at the top told us, interestingly enough. So the editor can get rid of one or the other of those. Very interesting. Now, there's counterpoint. It's out there. And we'll bring you up to speed. Empty Wheel picked this up and has this entry just to balance things out here. Both sides. You know we love that on the show. No, she says, Mueller probably didn't subpoena Trump yet. That's what she put together yesterday while all of you were out getting teal pumpkins. Nelson Cunningham, who has far better legal qualifications than I do, but who, as far as I've seen, has written very little on the Mueller investigation, has taken Politico's very good reporting on a second appeal involving the Mueller inquiry and started a parlor game among people convinced this means Trump got a subpoena. Jay Sekulow has already denied the report. Not that that means anything, I would add. Cunningham bases his argument on the following observations, along with the observations that the initial court filings came the day after Rudy Giuliani announced he had completed writing a challenge to an as-yet unserved subpoena. And she quotes the 4 bullet points. To save time, we won't go through every single one of them again. But remember, it was the expedited process, that was really basically the major point of all that. And then the en banc rehearing, etc. Clearly all evidence of something peculiarly of interest to the courts here. I suspect, she now continues, that the subpoena, if that's what it is either for a White House figure, like John Kelly or Don McGahn, possibly, for a lawyer, like Trump Organization lawyers Alan Garten and Alan Futterfuss, both had non-privileged conversations about the pushback on the June 9th meeting, as did Agalarov lawyer Scott Balber, or could be a journalist, or someone who considers themselves a journalist, even if they're really not, like Chuck Johnson or Lee Stranahan, both having denied being contacted by Mueller. Hannity would be another possibility. I've laid out the underlying timeline below. There are 3 dockets involved in the mystery challenge. 18 GJ, grand jury, 41 BAH, which is sealed, and 18-3068 and 18-3071 before the D.C. Circuit. For point of comparison, I've included Andrew Miller's appeal of a grand jury subpoena in the timeline, which Cunningham doesn't mention at all, in italics as well. Those docket numbers, 18GJ, 34BAH, and 183052, if that matters to you. It's there, I'm reading it. I've also included some key public reports that Cunningham doesn't mention that provide key context. There's a lot of keys there. Miller's docket easily disproves one of Cunningham's arguments, that the appeal itself was very quick. Miller, like the mystery challenger, both filed their appeal within days, suggesting that the timing came from Beryl Howell, not the appellants. With Miller, there was a pause to litigate the issue of Concord Management's status. I don't know who they are, but I haven't been reading Empty Wheel as frequently as you need to keep up with these things. But that pause was litigated on the same accelerated schedule as the jurisdictional issue for the mystery appellant. While with the mystery appellant, there appeared to be some slam-dunk procedural issue for why the circuit did not yet have jurisdiction. It was suggested to me that the mystery person may not have taken the legal step of being held in contempt before appealing, as Miller did, which would explain the quick jurisdictional response for the mystery challenger. Miller's docket also shows that the results of a motion to expedite, aren't that dramatic. With no expedited schedule, Miller's initial schedule, including the Concord litigation, provided him 24 days for his opening brief, gave Mueller 16 days to respond, and Miller 5 days to reply, with 41 days for the circuit to consider the appeal, or a total of 85 days after the filing. As Cunningham notes, the mystery appellant got just 11 days to file the initial brief, Mueller got 2 weeks to respond, and the mystery appellant got 7 days to reply. The circuit gave themselves a month to consider the appeal, or a total of 65 days from second appeal. But that works out to be 81 days from the initial September 24th appeal, about the same amount of time as Miller's appeal. The expedited time here mostly came out of the appellant's time for the initial brief, and the circuit consideration, which might be a fair outcome given the appeal without jurisdiction. Mueller's schedule remains roughly similar. It has been suggested that the mystery appellant's decision to appeal in spite of that procedural flaw may have provided more urgency for the appeal. For example, if Howell had not stayed contempt for the mystery appellant, then the risk of jailing would be greater than it would be for Miller, for whom she stayed the contempt. This is getting rather complex, of course. But I guess suffice to say that it pushes back on Cunningham's conclusion being the only logical one. Finally, although it doesn't look like it's final, Cunningham doesn't consider something else in the public record. On October 11th, right in the middle of this litigation, CNN revealed that Mueller had given Trump, and Trump was working on, a set of questions pertaining to conspiracy. The other day, Bloomberg reported that Trump had finished the answers to those questions, but was withholding them pending the outcome of the election. It's possible that the White House would voluntarily answer questions on conspiracy while litigating a subpoena for testimony on obstruction. Perhaps they would adopt the approach if their subpoena challenge pertains exclusively to actions Trump took as president. And if that were the case, that might explain the real reason Rudy was stalling on returning the answers, to see if the subpoena challenge worked. If that were the case, though, he would have to invent new reasons to explain the delay from November 6th past December 14th, when the case will be heard, and he has promised to appeal any subpoena to the Supreme Court. Alternately, Rudy could be stalling on the answers to await the appeal and using the election as his excuse just to avoid making this appeal public before the election. One other thing that might support Cunningham's argument that he doesn't raise is Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation on October 6th. Having confirmed Kavanaugh might explain the decision to ask for en banc consideration of what is probably a slam dunk procedural issue in hopes of short-circuiting the route to SCOTUS. But everyone in this investigation, including Yevgeny Prigozhin's team, have tailored their actions to Kavanaugh's presence on SCOTUS since even before he was confirmed. Still, I think all that less likely than other explanations, not least because this White House has never kept things like this secret, nor would they if they could use it to argue that Trump needs a good electoral turnout to keep him safe legally. That's probably the best and strongest and clearest point so far. I'm at least as intrigued by the way the timeline overlaps with Don McGahn's last big press push, around the same time as the initial filing before Beryl Howell. A lawyer like McGahn would also have reason to want to avoid the jurisdictional step of being held in contempt. Indeed, if he had been held in contempt, it might explain one reason for the urgency of the appeal. It's also one possible explanation for why someone would skip that step, with another being that whoever is making this challenge is even less well-lawyered than Miller. Finally, if it were McGahn appealing the grand jury subpoena, Katsas's recusal would be a no-brainer, though he has said he would recuse more generally. There are still plenty of other possibilities, and Cunningham's case is nowhere near as strong as suggested once you compare it with what happened with the relatively anonymous, powerless Andrew Miller challenge in the very same matter. So, okay, there's pushback, and then at the bottom of the the timeline of all the filings in the case. While she's got a command of a wider range of facts that she brings into it, the Cunningham speculation certainly reads a lot simpler than Marcy's supposition that it's somebody else. But it is a little bit difficult to believe at this point that that it was actually a direct subpoena of the president. Though it was pointed out at the beginning of the Cunningham piece, we were supposedly expecting this for some time. All right. There's places to move on to from here that I think are important. I mentioned that Rudy Giuliani has been relatively quiet, and one or two pieces on that front, not that we would be able to get all of them in before the break, almost certainly not the case. One of them returns to David K. Johnston. We'll save that one for the other side of the break and instead tease you with at least part of this ProPublica piece from Andrea Bernstein and Ilya Maritz of WNYC, published here by ProPublica. Rudy Giuliani's mystery trips to Russia, Armenia, and Ukraine. Their Trump Incorporated podcast covers all of this. We can read some of what's in there rather than play the podcast. You'll have to listen to that one on your own. We spent weeks investigating his work and clients in the former Soviet Union. We have so many questions, and we'll see if we can pose some of those questions before our break. Rudy Giuliani has had many identities in his time on the public stage. A crusading federal prosecutor who struck terror in mobsters and Wall Street titans alike. A sometimes cantankerous New York City mayor who became a national hero for his stirring leadership after 9/11. And currently, President Donald Trump's unpaid attorney in the Russia collusion investigation being led by Robert Mueller. They're all unpaid, I'm sure. Not supposed to be, but they are. In this week's episode of Trump Incorporated, they are digging into a part of Giuliani's work that has occurred largely outside of the spotlight. He has often traveled to Russia or other former Soviet states as guests of powerful players there, and since Trump was elected, he appears to have stepped up the frequency of those trips. You'd think he would step them down. He's very busy, right? Just last week, for example, Giuliani appeared in the former Soviet Republic of Armenia, which has close trade ties with Russia. He was invited, according to local press accounts, by Ara Abraiman, an Armenian businessman who lives in Russia. Abraiman once helped reconstruct the Kremlin and also received a medal for merit to the fatherland from President Vladimir Putin of Russia. Giuliani said he was in Armenia as a private citizen, but on a local TV news show, Abraiman implied that he expected Giuliani to carry a message for him to Trump. That is weird. The conversation was in Armenian, so it's not clear whether Giuliani understood what Abraiman was saying. That would be a reasonable excuse, I guess. While in Armenia, Giuliani also attended a technology conference. One of his businesses advises on cybersecurity. Very poorly, I would add. The conference program listed him as appearing on a panel that also included a Russian currently on the U.S. sanctions list, imposed after Russia's invasion of Crimea. That seems like a singularly bad idea. There are many things we don't know about Giuliani's trips. We don't know whether he's being paid, and if so, by whom. Giuliani declined to answer our questions. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just a brief paragraph or two left in the ProPublica piece about Rudy Giuliani, then on to something that might be a little bit more interesting. The ending of this piece is basically, hey, we don't know anything about why he's doing this, and an appeal to you. Do you know? If so, give us a call and let us know. So no real clear picture of what he's doing, just the curious picture that he's doing it. One thing we do know, they say, is that a company called Tri Global Strategic Ventures claims credit for organizing the trips. Abraiman is on Tri Global's board, as is a former Russian government minister. Tri Global and Abraiman, also did not respond to our questions. Giuliani's work abroad doesn't appear to break any laws or rules, but it also appears to be unprecedented. I mean, in what sense? I'm not really sure. But okay, said Barbara McQuaid, a former U.S. attorney and law professor at the University of Michigan. I don't recall seeing anything like this before. I guess meaning somebody who's working even as an unpaid lawyer for the President of the United States, traveling through the former Soviet Union with such frequency. But it hasn't been an available option for very long either. So I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of that one, but I thought I'd bring it to your attention. Seems like the sort of thing that will eventually be, when we come to understand what he's doing, an important part of the picture. Maybe not. However, there is something else which is on the radar and may also become an important part of the picture. Again, David K. Johnston involved here, not just retweeting it, but in fact writing the article and published in his own DCReport.org. Human rights group calls for investigation of Giuliani and, Trump money laundering scheme. Now that sounds like something that could be real. Prosecutors asked to probe Dutch middlemen washing billions in dirty Kazakh cash for real estate deals in U.S. and Europe. Certainly sounds like it could be happening. Let's see what David K. Johnston has to say. And for those of you who are old timers of the show, no, I probably won't read this one in falsetto. It's his words. But you remember this one. If you haven't been a long-time listener to the show, and you don't remember what prompted David K. Johnston to actually join us on the show at one point was he's an old school journalist. And of course, you don't have to be an old school journalist to make this point. It is a valid one. I just don't care. It's not that I don't care. But no, he makes the good point. When I read articles on the air, you know what I do. I very often editorialize on them right alongside the actual content of the article. Now, this is part of the reason that I insist on putting out a post later on with Scott Anderson's help to let you all have a look at the actual text of the articles so that you can determine for yourself if there's any question. Well, was that in the article or was that editorializing on the article? although I imagine that task is almost impossible, quite honestly, especially if you listen to the show live. I can't remember what he said exactly, and I don't remember. You can't compare the transcript of the show to the actual article, not to mention the fact that sometimes online articles are edited after the fact, but even the part of it that's my own fault, it will be very difficult to tell whether I'm reading the author's words or offering my own. And I try to differentiate between the two with tone in some cases. In some cases, I, after the fact, realize that I've drifted away from the text of the article and say, I now continue with what our author is telling us. I try and differentiate it that way. But it was a very good point. It was just, I don't like criticism. All of you shut up, basically. Like anybody, I get defensive about things. And he was right. The reality is you can't do that without being very clear about what's being read and what's being added. It's only that other authors would demand the same thing if they ever became aware of the show. We should be happy that David K. Johnston became aware of the show at all. Though I suspect it was not from having listened to the show regularly, but rather that we said in the social media blurb, the Twitter blurb about that's attached to the release of the podcast, that we had read one of his articles, and he searched his name or saw it and said, oh, I wonder what this person said about my fantastic article, and then listened and was appalled by my mixing the messages and asked that I not do that. So we responded to that by having him on the show because Armando asked him if he wanted to do it and thought it would be a great idea, and it was. And, of course, because I'm a petty person and a horrible enemy to have, and I'm not his enemy by any stretch of the imagination, but this will give you, this is somebody I would consider a friend of the cause, if not necessarily a friend of the show, only because I would consider him one. I don't know whether he would want to be friends with our show, but if I can do this to you as a friendly, I guess this is another signal. Don't make me get on the other side and want to antagonize you. That's a threat. I don't know. It's not really a bad one, because all I did here was I said, all right, so we'll differentiate between what David K. Johnston himself wrote and my editorializing it. I will differentiate it. Thus, all my editorializing will be in my normal voice, which you hear right now, and all of the David K. Johnston provided content will be spoken in a high falsetto. And I proceeded to read his entire article that way, which is a not so subtle jab at having been criticized for a very valid point, but wanting to be entertainingly petty about it. I hope it was entertaining. Hope that story was entertaining. I don't know if I have it in me to read his entire article in falsetto, but I'd better get started. And I will try and be very careful about editorializing and demarcating that. And truth be told, that should be in falsetto, but it was much funnier to do his article in falsetto. A human rights organization, according to David K. Johnston of DCReport.org. I've editorialized already. A human rights organization has asked Dutch prosecutors to open a criminal investigation into multi-billion-dollar money laundering schemes that they said were aided by Donald Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and his old law firm. The complaint is clearly aimed at examining how much money stolen from a former Soviet satellite ended up benefiting Trump. I editorialize herein. That is an interesting question. End editorializing. He is named 16 times in the complaint's footnotes. The complaint describes, quote, one of the biggest fraud cases ever, unquote, in which, quote, some of these money flows ultimately ended up in the Netherlands, unquote, because, quote, Dutch service providers helped to cover up the money laundering acts, unquote. I got to stop with the unquotes. Those words were not in David K. Johnston's article. That was editorializing. The money laundering network started in Kazakhstan, where a figure of up to $10 billion was purportedly embezzled, the complaint asserts. This money was subsequently circulated by two Kazakh oligarch families via a worldwide network of shell companies. A number of these companies were established in the Netherlands. The money was subsequently invested in real estate projects in the United States and Europe, after which it was paid out as profits, quote-unquote profits, via, once again, a network of shell companies. Netherlands banks and other firms play a significant role in illicit flows of cash around the world through sophisticated techniques to hide income and corporate profits. Many of these techniques appear to push the envelope on legal tax avoidance. When money laundering is involved, these aggressive techniques could cross a line into aiding and abetting criminal tax evasion. The complaint asserts that a small slice of the missing billions was run through Dutch shell corporations with the help from Rudy Giuliani's old law firm, Bracewell and Giuliani. Until 2016, Giuliani was a partner in the 470-lawyer firm. Neither Giuliani nor anyone at his firm, the other firm, I guess, Giuliani Security and Safety, LLC, responded to requests for his side of the story. Multiple requests for comment prompted no response from Greg M. Bopp, B-O-P-P, managing partner of what was then Bracewell and Giuliani, but is now called only Bracewell. Hasten to add, because Giuliani has left. The complaint was filed by Avaaz, that's A-V-A-A-Z. You've probably heard of them online, at least I have. A global human rights organization in Washington which claims 48 million members. It has issued an open call to prosecutors around the world to investigate the giant web of corruption that it says has propelled Trump's rise. Avaaz says it has approximately 290,000 members in the Netherlands. The complaint was filed October 22nd with J.J.M. van Dissets of the Dutch Public Prosecution Service by, and seems to be missing, Barbara van Straten, a lawyer in Amsterdam. The complaint filed with the Netherlands Public Prosecution Service in Amsterdam relies on court records from several countries that were dug up by investigative journalists, including James S. Henry, the investigative economics editor at DC Report. The Dutch television program Zembla aired an investigative piece on Trump and his Russian associates in 2017. It followed up with an expose of a Trump business partner's role in a Dutch money laundering scheme. The complaint is aimed at uncovering the full details of Russian money flowing to various Trump projects using so-called anonymous wealth companies. Those are shell companies created to hide the identities of the owners. Trump and his family are known to have received vast sums from shell companies and have bragged about how much of it came from people in Russia and other parts of the former Soviet Empire. Trump contends the deals were all lawful and he has no knowledge of any money laundering. A criminal investigation by Dutch prosecutors could help that country avoid banking sanctions and loss of reputation by showing that Amsterdam enforces its own laws and respects laws on transnational crimes. Roughly $10 billion was stolen from Kazakhstan, a former Soviet satellite located in Central Asia. The current Kazakh government is in court in Switzerland and elsewhere trying to recover the money and prosecute members of two families it says stole the money and laundered it in the West. Other lawsuits connected to the stolen money are being litigated in London, Paris, New York, and Los Angeles. The $10 billion theft was uncovered by PricewaterhouseCoopers during its 2009 audit of BTA Bank, the largest in Kazakhstan. In addition, there's about $300 million missing from Almaty, the largest city in Kazakhstan. Court documents identify the suspect thieves as Viktor Krapunov and Mukhtar Ablyazov, oligarchs whose families are bound not just by extensive business ties but also by marriage. Krapunov is former mayor of Almaty. His son Ilyas is married to Ablyazov's daughter. Ablyazov, I have no idea how you would pronounce that word, but that name. Giving it my best shot. Ablyazov. Not terribly complicated. And now, back to the words of David K. Johnston. There are strong indications that the revenues of these crimes were probably mixed via a complex money laundering network, and there was a great deal of mutual overlap between the companies and people suspected of the crimes. The complaint states both Krapunov and Ablyazov are fugitives. Krapunov, who was tried in absentia in Kazakhstan, has been convicted of corruption. Ablyazov, who was president of the looted bank, has his worldwide assets with an estimated value of $4.9 billion frozen 6 years ago by a British high court. Trump has done business since 1983 with Russian oligarchs and wealthy former officials and business people in former Soviet satellites, including Kazakhstan, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. A number of mobsters, American, Russian, and others, live in Trump Tower apartments. The building has long been known to local, federal, and international law enforcement as a nest of criminal residences. That's what I keep saying anyway. Oops, I'm talking out of turn here. In 1987, the Kremlin, then still a communist state, provided Trump and his first wife, Ivana, with a luxury trip to Russia. While a number of journalistic investigations have looked into Trump's dealings with oligarchs and their money using public records and sources, they were limited to public records, which are often scant. Dutch prosecutors, however, have the power to subpoena banking and other records, forcing their disclosure to prosecutors and potentially the public. Trump is known to have done deals with some of those mentioned in the complaint, including Felix Sater, everyone knows him, a violent Long Island felon who was born in Russia. For years, Sater traveled extensively with Trump, working on deals named in the complaint and handing out his Trump Organization business card. Despite these long ties, and both video and still photos showing the men together, Trump claimed during the presidential campaign that he would not recognize Sater if they were in the same room. Sater is believed to be cooperating with Robert Mueller, the American special prosecutor investigating Trump. In one deal involving Sater, millions of dollars from the Trump Soho Hotel and apartment tower disappeared into an Icelandic bank that was under the control of a Russian oligarch. That bank was part of a multi-billion-dollar scheme to defraud Dutch and British pension funds. Trump has testified that he was due 18% of profits from the building. The faux gold letters bearing the name, under an agreement reached a year ago, have been pried from the building facade. Just 3 weeks before the 2016 election, a massive expose of Trump's role in helping Kazakh oligarchs hide their illicit money appeared in the Financial Times, a British business newspaper. Dirty Money, Trump and the Kazakh Connection, described evidence a Trump venture has links to alleged laundering network. An alleged laundering network, I guess. The newspaper said its investigation found that Trump had, quote, assembled an eclectic collection of backers and collaborators. Some had checkered pasts with links to organized crime or fraud schemes, but perhaps the biggest risk for Mr. Trump's complex, often opaque business empire was that it might be used for a purpose U.S. officials fear is rife in the country's real estate sector, laundering dirty money. And that will come as no surprise to most of you at this point, I think. Let's see. We'll continue on here. Trump's Soho project has multiple ties to an alleged international money laundering network. Title deeds, bank records, and correspondence show that a Kazakh family accused of laundering hundreds of millions of stolen dollars bought luxury apartments in a Manhattan tower, part owned by Mr. Trump, and embarked on major business ventures with one of the tycoon's partners. The British newspaper, the Financial Times, reported after an extensive investigation. Trump and his partners, the FT asserted, engaged in condo sales that appear to have violated the Patriot Act. The post-9/11, the Patriot Act. The post-9/11 law that requires banks, developers, and others to know who their customers are and the sources of their money. Time out for the editorial statement. I realize, though, a lot of this is already on the record with those of you who have been listening for a long time. But that's a very good point and deserves to be reiterated. Trump may have violated the Patriot Act in the almost immediate aftermath of 9/11, which, of course, he waves around as some sort of sign of his patriotism, that he was watching on TV and saw people dancing and he was even there helping clean up the rubble. Meanwhile, he is violating the Patriot Act right away in order to stuff money in his pockets. Interesting. Now back to the article. Investigations to identify anonymous buyers of luxury apartments in New York and Florida, to determine the extent of any money laundering were announced in January of 2016 by the federal government's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN. 3 months later, the FinCEN director, Jennifer Shasky Calvary, spoke about her years of work on transnational Russian organized crime networks. Much of her work involved Russian crime families laundering their funds through U.S. financial system. Often this involved the suspected purchase of personal residences with criminal proceeds. In July 2016, the month the GOP nominated Trump, FinCEN announced it would be investigating sales of luxury apartments beyond New York and Florida because of its growing concern about flows of illicit cash disguised in real estate deals. While Giuliani calls himself Trump's personal lawyer, his role is primarily to spread Trumpian disinformation about Special Prosecutor Mueller's investigations into Russian collusion and related matters concerning Trump and his 2016 presidential campaign. Because Giuliani appears on so many cable and other television shows, but not in court, MSNBC host Lawrence O'Donnell calls the former New York City mayor Trump's TV lawyer. And there you have it. Now, why that ran yesterday, quite honestly, I have no idea. Although I guess the new bit about it is that there's a human rights group calling for an investigation in the Netherlands, but I guess that wasn't really enough of a story all by itself. So the rest of it seems to have been background that we were already aware of. So I don't know. I'm a little bit disappointed in having spent that much time on it, but it gives you some idea of the many things going on in Rudy Giuliani's life all of a sudden. And I guess perhaps, I don't think he's really going to take notice of this investigation just yet, but maybe it has something to do with his somewhat more pronounced silence over the last couple of days. It ties in with a couple of other items that have been in the news. I guess we might as well make mention of the fact that because they mentioned the sale of apartments both in New York and Florida to Russian organized crime figures and other organized crime figures around the world, including former Soviet republics. We are reminded of the articles we read some months ago about the pregnancy tourism, the anchor baby tourism that appears to be going on, in particular in the Florida apartment towers. So for someone who is poised to, or says he's poised to end birthright citizenship, he would appear to be, perhaps, if he's serious about it, and maybe that he's not, jeopardizing a major income stream. Or maybe he's exhausted the income stream by having sold the apartments already, and the continuing stream of brides and girlfriends of Russian oligarchs who continue to come to stay in the seaside apartments in the Florida apartment towers, condo towers, and so that they can deliver their babies on American soil and get them American citizenship. I guess either that's set to end, or maybe he's just out of the revenue stream because now it is oligarchs subletting their condos to others privately so that they too can bring their wives and girlfriends to the United States to give birth. And there may not be money making its way to Donald Trump's pockets from that operation anymore, but well worth putting on the record. And speaking, as we were earlier, about grand jury indictments or subpoenas anyway, further developments in the lawsuits to reveal the secret paperwork and dockets from the Watergate investigation. And let's see, I think we're reminded by that one this morning. Among others, Kate Sherrill had sent us this piece. Do we have an actual article to read here? I think I might just have a tweet from before. Virginia Heffernan's tweet here is what Kate has sent on to us. The roadmap, remember that whole thing, is a masterpiece of restraint. There's a tendency now to assume excess must combat excess. Yet faced with Nixon, Jaworski wrote a spare 55-page document and gave it to Congress where it didn't leak. It's powerful because it's by the book, kind of like Mueller. And this leading to an entry over at the Lawfare blog about the Watergate roadmap, which we read about when the first couple items came out on it. And now a new one yesterday from Jack Goldsmith and Benjamin Wittes. Is that different from what I'm looking at here in reading Justin Miller's tweet? He says it's confirmed. Grand jury was prepared to indict President Nixon on 4 criminal counts, according to the archives here. And he follows it up. Nixon grand jury member said in 1982, the panel had voted to indict, but was denied. So it's an interesting question here. Let's see. And what is this linked to? A UPI piece from, that's the 1982 comments. Interesting. We never saw that one. 1982, June 17th to be exact. Watergate grand jury tried to indict President Nixon. So you can't end birthright citizenship by executive order, and you can't indict a sitting president, except I guess they decided to try to do it anyway. Let's just take a look at that one, that historical piece there. The Watergate grand jury tried relentlessly to indict Richard Nixon, but their efforts were prevented by Special Prosecutor Leon Jaworski, members of the panel said in an interview broadcast Thursday night. That would be Thursday, 1982. ABC TV's 2020 program, that's an old program, said 7 of the 23 grand jury members agreed to break their oath of silence and talk about their 30 months of pondering evidence in the Watergate break-in because they're convinced justice was not done. Wow. Grand jury member Elaine Edlund told 2020 about the results of a straw vote taken on whether to indict the president after the grand jury had heard the Watergate tapes. There were 19 people in the grand jury room that particular day, and we all raised our hands about wanting an indictment. All of us. And some of us raised both hands. Voter fraud. I knew it. The prosecution team agreed with the grand jury, ABC said, and out of its Watergate task force report came a 6-page indictment detailing specific criminal allegations for which Nixon could have been named. Those allegations included bribery, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and obstruction of a criminal investigation, ABC said. ABC said the 4-count indictment needed only a formal jury vote, the foreman's signature and Jaworski's signature to make it effective. Former Assistant Prosecutor George Frampton, not Peter's brother, but interesting nonetheless. However, at the outset of this process, it was clear to us that Leon Jaworski did not share those views, or at least was not going to be convinced. Jaworski, a Houston attorney who was appointed by Nixon to replace Archibald Cox as special Watergate prosecutor, said he took the job believing Nixon was innocent. I still did not think that Mr. Nixon was involved until I listened to some tape recordings in, it was about early December. I had been there about 5 or 6 weeks, and I was shocked to find that he was implicated, Jaworski said. Grand jury deputy foreman Harold Evans said Jaworski argued against indictment, citing such things as the trauma of the country and the lack of legal precedent for indicting a sitting president. And foremost, we were told point blank, perhaps not in these very words, that an indictment would not be signed. Grand jury foreman Vladimir, believe it or not, Pregelj, I have no idea how you might pronounce Pregelj, asked by whom it would not be signed, he said, by Jaworski. ABC said Jaworski and his staff convinced the jury to forward their evidence against Nixon to the House Impeachment Committee. We read about that one. That was very interesting. And led the panel members to believe that if the president tried to escape impeachment by resignation, they would be given another chance to hand down an indictment. But when Nixon did resign on August 9th, 1974, Jaworski asked his staff for advice, and his own counsel, Philip Lacovara, recommended indictment, ABC said. That's very interesting, too. But Jaworski never took the issue back to the grand jury, ABC said. Instead, he concluded an indictment of Nixon might interfere with the trials of other Watergate defendants. When President Ford later pardoned Nixon, the grand jury was shocked, ABC said. Our jury foreman here wrote Jaworski urging that the grand jury be reconvened to see if the pardon could be challenged. He said Jaworski took no action on his letter. The pardon was not subject to legal challenge, regardless of what one's opinion may have been about the advisability of granting a pardon, Jaworski told ABC. So another point I'll just throw out there for your consideration. They say you can't end birthright citizenship by executive order. Of course, if 5 rogue justices end up saying for some reason or another that you can, then you can. I keep reiterating that. They say you can't do that. Well, they say you can't indict a sitting president. And they say you can't challenge a pardon's legality. Well, you can. You might lose, but you can. It's out there, and you can do it really basically whenever you want, too. I might add that. All right, time for us to wrap up. We won't be able to get to Jack Goldsmith and Benjamin Witty's on the Watergate roadmap. Let's see if we can return to that tomorrow. Plus, we have much more to get to. Stuff we ended up the show last Friday with that I've been promising you all week that I really hope to shoehorn in there. And in the meantime, Justice Putnam to bring you up to date on everything we didn't get to today.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Damn, that was some good timing. Hey, I told you about Chris Kobach on TV getting yelled at by Jeffrey Toobin. I didn't get to discuss that in any depth, but Justice has it all queued up and ready to go. He'll be talking about that. Plus, Trump's EPA concludes communities don't have the right to know about potentially toxic emissions and other unbelievable crap next.